Hello and welcome to Dialogue. Despite strong opposition from the international community, Israel is determined to take control of Gaza City, the largest urban center in Gaza, which could displace hundreds of thousands of people from the area. Meanwhile, Palestinians have reported the heaviest bombings in a week in areas just east of Gaza City. So how will Israel take over Gaza? What does this move mean for Gaza and the entire region? And what could be the possible consequences? Join us for our discussion today, live from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. Well, before our main discussion today, let's take a quick look at the latest on the China-U.S. trade talks. The two countries have agreed to extend their tariff truce until November, while they continue to try to work out a deal. Joining me is Wang Huiyao, founder and president of the Center for China and Globalization, and also a former counselor of the China State Council. Welcome to Dialogue, Huiyao. So in a joint statement, both China and the U.S. have agreed to a second 90-day suspension of the high tariffs imposed on each other. So are you surprised with the extension?
Well, yes or no. I think this is expected. We had a very good discussion at Stockholm just recently, and it's agreed upon that this is going to be announced. I'm glad that President Trump has finally signed this off, and so that we got another 90 days truce, and which means that we're going to probably have a summit of APEC on the November 1st. So this 90 days will beyond that, and so this paved the way for further discussions, negotiations, and probably we're going to have a good outcome of this summit. But also on the other hand, this is welcomed by the whole world because China and U.S. are so much intertwined, so much interrelated, connected. It has a huge impact on the global supply chain, on global move. And also President Trump is busy now with his summit in Alaska with President Putin. So I think this signing of a great truce, that agreement put the things off, is really great news for the world.
Well, just as you said, Huiyao, both sides have characterized their recent talks in Stockholm as constructive. So from your point of view, what does this another 90-day tariff delay mean for trade talks between the two sides?
Well, there's many things. First of all, I think we need to stabilize the world. The world is really devastated by the uncertainty, by the disruptions, and by all those ups and downs that caused by this tariff war. President Trump launched a trade war with a few dozen countries, 100 countries already. So, but he is realistic. He's pragmatic. He realized China is so important, so much intertwined with U.S. We are in the U.S. and U.S. in China. It's such indispensable of each other. So if the two largest economies are not working together, this is going to be a huge impact of the world. So I think also President Trump wants to pursue his tariff strategy with other countries like EU, Japan, Brazil, India, and then he can't afford to have too many fronts to open that. And he also realized China is really the only country that stand up strongly against any tariff and unilateralism and bully. And so China is really using his own weight and own measures to counterbalance a lot of U.S. mechanism. So I think in that sense, they realize China is a competitor, but it also is a very strong competitor, and you can just really using the strategy like they use for other countries. You have to trade China, especially because of its so much intertwined. We have so much U.S. company operating in China. Apple, 80% of the phone was made here. Elon Musk have a 50% of EV car made here. We see him President Trump meeting the CEO of Apple's today with Intel, with the NVIDIA, of all those big IT firms, so that I'm sure the business will tell him that China is such an important market, and we cannot afford disruption with China. We have to really work along with China, and the whole global supply chain is hinged upon U.S.-China have a reasonable approaches. So I think this is good for news, not only for China and the U.S., but also for the world.
Yeah, Huiyao, there was some concern, at least when some senior U.S. officials mentioning it's like they are expanding the talks between the two sides from bilateral trade to some other issues, like the purchase of oil and gas from Russia, by China, India. They talk about, punitive tariff of 100%. How will that complicate the talks between the two sides?
Well, I think President Trump have a deadline for Russia, which is just on the 8th that to ceasefire. So now he already got Putin agreed to have this Alaska summit to do the ceasefire. So on the other hand, I think he's really putting all the pressures on Russia. That he's threatening to sanction on India, and he probably has wants to do that on China. But China is a big guy, so it's difficult to really put all the measures in that, because also this is very unilateral. Why U.S. can trade with anybody but not China and India? So it doesn't make a sense. So I think China is resilient enough to stand up all those bullies and misconduct or pressures or unilateralism. But on the other hand, I do think China can do more trade with U.S. Like, Trump wants China to buy more soybean. Absolutely, we can buy more soybean from U.S. And also U.S. wants China to play more active role in mediating conflicts. I'm sure China can do that, and with Russia-Ukraine war. So let's do it in a more positive way rather than in a really street smart kind of all the tactics that we're using in the real estate business. I think we are handling two largest bilateral relations in the world, the most important bilateral relation. We need some professional, more reasonable approach. I think if we can really talk, sit down, and keep dialogue like this, which is great. So we think we should be doing fine.
Yeah, finally, Huiyao, of course, as you said, Trump, wrote in a social media post calling China to quadruple its purchase of American soybeans, saying that will help reduce the trade deficit with China. But anyway, that's understandable. Soybeans will be most likely part of the future deal. But how will that deal look like to you, Huiyao?
Well, I think this is low-hanging fruit. Probably Trump is talking. We remember in the phase one deal that we signed with Trump 1.0. Buying soybean is a large part of the deal, and also Trump has his base in those agricultural-based states where soybean is really bread and butter business. So I think that's understandable that he's pushing for that. But I think China, after all, goodness, consume a lot. Now we are buying 70% from Brazil. I think China could buy a bit more from U.S. too. So I don't see that as a challenge. But the thing is that we need to really keep the good narrative and good mood and good atmosphere. And this kind of constructive dialogue is so crucial to impact on the negotiation, because we cannot bully each other, we cannot threaten each other, we cannot really being as a kind of world unilateralism to really prevail on any other countries. China is really growing up to a big country now and can have its principle, have its standards, and really going to stand up all those pressures. So I think the best way for two countries is really to get along, keep dialogue. And we're having this summit probably happening. President Trump may come to China, or President Xi may go to U.S. Let's do that. We have APEC summit on October 31st and November 1st, and then we probably have a summit, and then maybe we could have a deal. Let's have a phase two, to conclude that, and so that we can stabilize the war. But in the meantime, I think Trump is, reset American trade with many countries, which is fine on his American business. But I don't think that will carry very long. And China's unique strategy of have more economic cooperation, safeguard WTO, RCEP, CPTPP, and regional trade with ASEAN, with Latin American, every country. So that probably will prevail in the end, including the Belt and Road.
Certainly keep an eye on the future development. Thank you, Huiyao. Thank you for speaking to us. And let's have a short break. When we're back, we'll take a look at the Israel plan to take control of Gaza. Welcome back. Joining me in this part are Rob Geist Pinfold, lecturer in international security at the King's College London, Professor Zhang Chuchu, deputy director of the Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Fudan University, and Gershon Baskin, co-founder and co-director of the Alliance for Two States. Welcome to the show. Let's start with Mr. Baskin. Mr. Baskin, tell us about, you are in Jerusalem. Tell us about the thinking behind the plan, to take control of the Gaza City, possibly the entire strip there. What's the plan like? Can you turn on your mic? Yeah. Yes?
The Israeli government, led by Prime Minister Netanyahu, believes very strongly that they must continue to launch their military operation to eradicate Hamas. This is their primary objective. It's been the primary objective since the beginning of the war 22 months ago. They don't believe that there is anything that Israel can do in Gaza except remove from Hamas from power and make sure that Hamas has no ability to ever be a threat to Israel. This, of course, is a fallacy. They cannot destroy Hamas militarily. Hamas will never surrender. The only way of ending this war and bringing home the 50 Israeli hostages, 20 who are believed to be alive, is through a negotiated agreement with Hamas. But the big difficulty in doing that is that Hamas, while saying that they will no longer govern Gaza, there is no alternative to Hamas yet. The Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas, has not appointed anyone. No one else has stood up and said, I'm willing to take over the Gaza Strip and create a legitimate government there. So the Israelis, with the American support, are saying that we cannot withdraw from Gaza. As long as Hamas is in power there, even if they have minimal power, they're the only power base in Gaza, and they will rise to take power once again. And therefore, Israel must continue its military operation.
Professor Zhang Chuchu, how do you look at this legal foundation, or is there a legal foundation for Israel to justify its next move, to take control of the region?
Well, absolutely. There is no legal foundation because the plan to take over the Gaza City is widely viewed at the moment by international society as an illegal an action under the international law by the United Nations, human rights organizations, and also the other governments in the world. And also many Arab states have already condemned it as reinforcing the illegal occupation. And of course, right now, the issue here is that Israel does not have a clear international right to execute these takeover according to the predominant legal interpretations. While what Netanyahu has been keeping saying is that he's trying to invoke the self-defense under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter in order to justify his actions against Hamas. And the argument is that he's going to implement the so-called self-defense. But the argument is also contested because Gaza's status as occupied territory under the international law limits Israel's ability to conduct this kind of military operations.
Well, Mr. Pinfold, experts say some 800,000 people live around the city now, the Gaza City, many of whom have been displaced multiple times. The Israel military would forcibly evacuate all these people if the plan is carried forward. Is that the case?
Well, this is why Israel's military are so strongly against the plan. I think it's important to note here that Israel's military and Israel's government have not been speaking with one voice regarding this policy. The IDF chief, Eyal Zamir, has very vocally, at least from cabinet leaks, come out against this policy, specifically because it will lead to Israel having to displace upwards of 800,000 Gazans. Remember that Gaza City is the last remaining so-called safe zone in northern Gaza. The Gaza Strip has a pre-war population of around 2 million Palestinians. They were spread evenly throughout the territory. Now, the vast majority of them are concentrated in southern Gaza, around 20% of the territory. So what you'd see here would be almost 100% of Gaza's remaining population concentrated in 20% of the territory. And I think that shows you what Israel's goal is here, and Netanyahu's specific goal, to basically make Gaza so unlivable, to make life there so miserable, so chaotic, that someone else has to step in to take over the welfare of the Palestinian residents of the territory. And Netanyahu himself has alluded to this, saying that he wants Arab states to look after the civilian residents of the Gaza Strip. How that would come about, we don't know. Who would do that, we don't know. It would most likely be the Gulf states. We do know that the Gulf states have in the past said that they would do this. They would be part of a day after scenario for Gaza, but this would not come for free. Israel would have to make concessions towards a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. So by making Gaza so unlivable, so chaotic, I think Netanyahu's long-term endgame plan here is to force the Arab states' hand, to get them to step in whilst dropping those preconditions and prices that they impose on Israel. So Israel can have its cake and eat it, control Gaza without actually being responsible for the residents and without taking any advances towards Palestinian statehood.
Mr. Pinfold, you're talking about the role by other Arab nations here. We know that throughout the Gaza, 70% of all buildings have been destroyed. Where will these people go even if, let's imagine, the military will go along with the cabinet decision or Security Council? As Netanyahu said, it's a political decision, it's a decision by the cabinet, not a military decision or decision by the military. So if they play along, but where will they put these people?
Well, the goal here is to force them all to live in southern Gaza, as I say, and you'd have a scenario where around 2 million Gazans are living in 20% of the territory. That is frankly unsustainable. And that, I think, shows you what Netanyahu's day after, his end game here, is making Gaza so unlivable and so chaotic that the residents of Gaza either spill out into the Sinai Peninsula, or they move abroad, or the Arab states come in and look after the welfare of those Gazan civilians. I don't think Netanyahu has a personal preference. His political behavior has changed significantly since October the 7th. But one thing that has stayed the same is his preference to kick difficult decisions down the road and to hope that he can muddle through. So I don't think Netanyahu has a clear day after plan, but in the short term, causing chaos is very much aligned with his strategic logic.
Mr. Baskin, what's the public, response inside Israel? Do you think that people go along or, are supportive of the government's decision, to take full control of the region?
A large majority of the Israeli citizens are opposed to continuing the war. They want the war to end, and they want the soldiers brought home along with the hostages. The problem is that Israeli society is exhausted, is living in despair, lacks political efficacy that they can actually do something. The demonstrations that are held every single day, and particularly on the weekends by supporters of the hostage families, are tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands. And those kind of numbers can't force the government to do anything. Netanyahu is resolved to continue with this war. This war keeps him in power, and that's his primary concern now, not the national security interest of the state of Israel, but the national security interest of Mr. Netanyahu, his family, and his government. This is what's guiding us. I want to point out to the previous speaker that there's not a single Arab country that will send one single troop to Gaza if they are not invited by a legitimate Palestinian government. Now, Hamas has said that they're willing to step down from governance. They're willing to accept a Palestinian technocratic government. Until that government is formed, not a single Arab country will send one person to Gaza to assist the Palestinians in governing Gaza, in restoring law and order, and in rebuilding Gaza. This is critical to understand. Netanyahu is being motivated and pushed by the more extreme elements of his government, but he's not a puppet of them. He has adopted their ideology, and the ideology is one of ethnic cleansing, of getting the Palestinians to leave Gaza so that they can resettle Gaza with Israeli settlements. Now, you can talk about international law, but Israel has never really cared about international law. Israel cares about international politics. And if the United States will continue to use its veto in the Security Council, Israel has nothing to worry about. The governments of the world have not imposed real sanctions on Israel ever. Maybe that will begin now. We see a German a partial arms embargo against Israel. This is very new. But if the international community understands its responsibility, then it must know that if it doesn't prevent genocide from taking place, it is complicit in that genocide, according to international law. And this must be stopped. This war has to end. The international community has a direct responsibility to force Israel to end the war. Even if there is no solution for the problem of Gaza right now, and Hamas is still in Gaza, there is an obligation of us all, the entire world, to end this war now.
Absolutely. Professor Zhang, I mean, let's imagine even everything works out, but still, even on the Israeli side, but also there's the Palestinians, residents in Gaza, the Hamas. What's their response? Will they go along with the idea to move to the southern part of the region?
Yes, that is very likely. So to begin with, at the moment, although Hamas has already been heavily weakened over the past 1 year and a half, still it has some of its infrastructure and some of its militias. So what is going to happen is that there is going to be an escalation of the conflict, and Hamas is also very likely to use its rocket fire or guerrilla warfare in Gaza City. And also we have to note that it also can coordinate with allies like the Palestinian Islamic Jihad for joint operations. So I think if the Gaza City plan proceeds, the ground war is poised for very significant escalation, potentially involving into a prolonged confrontation. And at the moment, I totally agree with you that Hamas is not just a movement, but also an ideology. So also, it's very hard to say who is Hamas and who is not in Gaza. And also, even if Netanyahu announces that there is no longer Hamas, but there is still, let's say, Jihad and the other Islamist groups, and also, the ideology of the anti-Israel thinking is there. And also a long-term occupation is going to further escalate this kind of confrontation between the two sides.
Mr. Baskin, let's go back to you. You are the co-founder and the co-director of the Alliance for the Two States solution there. But exactly, if you look at the response from the Arab countries, Jordan and Egypt have warned the operation threatens, quote, two-state solution prospects. And the international community, especially European countries, also expressed this shock and concern of the collapse, of the prospect of the two-state solutions. Tell us more on that.
Well, I think that actually what we're seeing is the unfolding of events that will bring us closer to a two-state solution than we've been for a very long time. It might seem delusional to imagine that from this war, we could actually have a peace settlement between the Israeli and Palestinian people. But this is inevitable because even when this horrible war is over, there still remain 7 million Israeli Jews and 7 million Palestinians living between the river and the sea. There is no other solution. What we see is a massing of public opinion around the world and state decisions to recognize the state of Palestine. This is something that's very new because most of these countries that have yet to recognize the state of Palestine have talked about a two-state solution for decades, but only recognized one of them. Now, this is going to change the reality for Palestinians on the ground. You can have 192 member states of the United Nations recognizing the state of Palestine, and the Israeli occupation continues, and the life of Palestinians remains under occupation without freedom, liberation, and dignity. We only really need the state of Israel to recognize the rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination. But these are actions that are going to put more pressure on the state of Israel and on the people of Israel to understand that there is no other solution. We can't keep killing each other. We can't keep going back to war. There is no other solution. The reality in Gaza today, who have lived through the collective national suicide that the Hamas movement created on October 7th, don't want Hamas anymore. They are understanding that there is no viable armed struggle that will free Palestine. Palestine will not be freed for Palestinians by killing Israelis. It's not going to work. And this war proves that it doesn't work. And the Palestinian, I think, are believing now more and more that there has to be a negotiated solution, but it has to be one which is regional, supported by the regional countries, supported by the international community, supported by China and the rest of the world. This is very important to let Israel know that it has to give up its occupation over the Palestinian people and allow them to be free, because Israel will never be secure until the Palestinians are secure and they have freedom as well.
Yes, well said there. Mr. Pinfold, do you think there's enough pressure? Like if you look at international community, Germany, for example, is withdrawing support, military support to Israel. I think the UK also suspended military arms support to Israel. But is that enough?
In a word, no. I share Gershon's prescription that the two-state solution is the only way forward. And I think, these steps towards, for example, recognition of Palestine is something positive that might help us get there one day. But I'm slightly more pessimistic than Gershon on the short-term prospects of this happening anytime soon, particularly as a result of this horrible war. Remember that yes, okay, Germany is suspending arms exports. That is something that's made a lot of waves in Israel and attracts a lot of attention from Israeli news, for example. These recognitions of Palestinian states by countries like the UK, also Australia, possibly New Zealand, that is something unprecedented and new. But these gestures at the moment are largely performative. Recognizing Palestine as a state, yes, it's a good thing. Yes, it helps advance the two-state solution, but it doesn't really do anything on the ground. The situation on the ground is that we have a continued Israeli occupation of the Gaza Strip. That's not looking like it's going to end anytime soon. We have Israel entrenching itself more and more day by day in the West Bank and looking to change demographics there on the ground and basically promote a de facto, if not a de jure, annexation of the territory. So recognizing a Palestinian state, yes, it's well and good, but it doesn't change anything. At the end of the day, the book stops here in Washington, D.C. The only real international actor with any tangible power to influence and shape Israeli policy is the U.S., and we've seen that time and time again. And at the moment, the Trump administration isn't interested. Yes, it has reshaped Israeli policy more broadly in the region, for example, Israel's policies towards Syria. But Trump has shown very, very little inclination or desire to really shift the dial on Gaza. We're hearing that he's very upset at seeing pictures of malnourished children dying on a daily basis. But until he's willing to do something about that, Israel will be able to carry on and perpetuate the dire status quo that we have in both the Gaza Strip and indeed the West Bank.
Thank you, Rob, there. Mr. Baskin, why is the U.S. government so unwilling to, adjust their position, let's say? As the whole world is witnessing what's happening in Gaza, and I think even the European countries, they are changing their position. Why is it so difficult for the U.S. to adjust their policy there?
Well, I think the U.S. is trying to make adjustments on all its policy vis-a-vis the world, seeing itself as the only world leader, the only people who make a decision and change world events. And we've seen President Trump focused on other areas of the world. He'll be meeting with President Putin on Friday. This is a big focus. He brought the Armenians and the Azerbaijanis together. I think the Trump position, what I understand is the Trump position is that they're still very engaged in the attempts to mediation. Mr. Witkoff is going back to Qatar. He's met with the Qatari prime minister several times. They're pushing for a deal to be done, but the Americans have conditions. One of those conditions are that the Hamas immediately begin feeding the hostages and providing them with medical welfare. They've even said that if one hostage dies because of malnutrition, because of starvation, they will never get American support. They have a demand that there be a Palestinian government in place in Gaza now, in place of Hamas, not after the war. They won't put pressure on Israel to withdraw from Gaza if there is no alternative to the Hamas government. Well, this is the responsibility of the Palestinians to make sure it happens. If these pieces fall into place, the Americans, I think, will force Netanyahu to end the war. Trump has said it, that the war has to end, but they want these other missing pieces to fall into place. A new government, some kind of obligation on the demilitarization of Gaza. These are essential, and the Americans are putting together what I heard a very huge aid package for Gaza.
We thank you, Mr. Baskin. With that, we come to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also watch us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thank you for being with us. See you next time.